Okay, so are you ready to dive into something really powerful today?
Absolutely.
We're taking a deep dive into Michelle Zauner's memoir, Crying in H Mart. It's it's one of those books that just stays with you,
Yeah,
you know.
it really does.
And we asked you to share some excerpts with us, and we're really excited to kind of unpack some of these themes with you.
Yeah.
One of the things that really struck me, and I know it struck a lot of people, was how Zauner uses Korean cuisine
hmm
and even just the setting of H Mart to cope with the illness and passing of her mother.
Well, and what's so fascinating about this book is that it's not just about food, right?
Right.
It's about how food becomes this intricate language between Zahner and her mother.
It's like the way that some families, will express their love through words or,
Yeah.
gifts. Her family, they did it through the perfectly, placed dumplings or a steaming bowl of kimchi jjigae.
Absolutely. And Zahner even talks about how her mom always remembered everyone's food preferences, whether it was extra broth in the stew or holding back on the spice for someone.
Yeah,
It's like each meal was carefully curated, like a personalized act of love.
totally. It wasn't just about the food itself, it was the anticipation.
Yes.
The way that her mom would like practically inhale the steam off of the new dish or
Yes.
or her eyes would sparkle with this joy.
That sensory experience is so central to this memoir,
It is.
especially when she describes H Mart.
Oh yeah.
For her, it becomes this haven, this sensory explosion that connects her to her Korean heritage, especially after her mother's passing.
Oh, for sure. Because she describes those aisles, you know, packed with all of the ingredients and the clatter of the carts and the aroma of all the spices. It's almost like stepping into a living, breathing memory
Yes.
for her.
And it's interesting because H Mart is just a grocery store to a lot of people, right?
Right.
But for her, it becomes this emotional landscape where she processes her grief.
Yeah, it's like grief has this uncanny ability to linger in those aromas and those flavors that she associates with her mom. Like you can almost feel the weight of her longing when she's surrounded by all those ingredients her mother would have used.
Yes. And it's not just sadness she grapples with. I mean, she's remarkably candid about the anger and the frustration that come with grief as well.
Right. And speaking of complex emotions,
Yeah.
her exploration of her Korean American identity is really fascinating too. Growing up with a Caucasian father and a Korean mother, she seems caught between these two worlds, constantly trying to figure out where she fits in.
And that internal conflict really comes to life when she describes her trip to Korea.
Yeah.
She talks about being praised for her appearance, even being mistaken for being fully Caucasian,
Yes.
which stirs up all these complicated feelings about beauty standards and cultural expectations.
I love that anecdote about her being scouted by a K-drama director
Yes.
because of her looks. It's like for a fleeting moment, she entertains this fantasy of fame and belonging in Korea.
Mm.
It's like a small window into a
Yeah.
what-if life.
Yeah. And then in true motherly fashion, her mom brings her back down to earth.
Yes.
It's a humorous moment, but it also reveals this underlying tension between Zahner's yearning for acceptance and her mother's pragmatic concerns.
Right.
It speaks to their complex mother-daughter dynamic, doesn't it?
It really does, because on the one hand, her mother is encouraging her to embrace her Korean heritage.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's this underlying sense that Zauner needs to navigate the world differently because she is biracial. It's a lot to unpack.
It is, and it's further complicated by those more challenging aspects of their relationship that Zahner doesn't shy away from. She talks about her mom's strict expectations, the pressure to excel, and how stifling those expectations could feel at times.
And those anecdotes, like the one about her mom's reaction to her falling from a tree as a child,
Yes.
really highlight those dynamics.
Her mother's response might seem harsh on the surface, but later on, Zahner reflects on it as a form of tough love.
Right.
It speaks to the cultural differences in upbringing,
Yeah.
but also to her mother's desire to equip her daughter with the resilience to kind of handle whatever came her way.
It's like her mom, having navigated those complexities herself, wanted to equip her daughter with those tools.
Yes. It makes you wonder, though, how much of that tough love stemmed from her own experiences, her
Yeah.
own struggles navigating cultural expectations.
Right.
Because she had to do it, too.
It's these nuanced layers of their relationship that make the memoir so compelling. It's not just a sentimental tribute,
Mm-hmm.
you know? It's brutally honest and raw about their arguments and the teenage rebellion and the clash
Yeah.
of wills, and it's so relatable
Oh,
because who
absolutely.
hasn't butted heads with their parents?
Exactly. But, through those clashes, you see this really deep bond between them.
Oh, yeah.
Despite their differences, there's this underlying current of love and fierce protectiveness,
Yes.
especially in how her mother expresses her love through, you guessed it, food.
It's like a love language spoken through, perfectly cooked short rib and a steaming bowl of jjigae.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, can we talk about how central food is to their reconciliation?
Absolutely. Food becomes this symbolic bridge between them, a way to reconnect even when words fail.
Like when they bond over their shared love for Korean food at Seoul Cafe,
Yes.
even amidst all that teenage angst and rebellion,
Yes.
those shared meals offer this sense normalcy, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's in those seemingly ordinary moments, sharing a plate of japchae or digging into a bubbling hot pot, that you sense this unspoken understanding between them. Like food transcends their differences and allows them to connect on this primal, almost spiritual level.
Speaking of connection, I found it really fascinating how Zauner's passion for music,
Yes.
something so personal to her,
Really?
created this unexpected friction with her mother.
Well, and that's where we see another layer of their dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Music represents this urge for independence, this desire to break free from expectations and forge her own path, and that doesn't always go well.
Right. It's like that classic tale of teenage rebellion amplified by the intensity of creative passion.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if her mom saw a bit of herself in Zauner's determination, that drive to pursue something unconventional.
And it's a good reminder, I think, that our parents, despite what we might think, were once dreamers and rebels too, they had aspirations and passions that may have gotten, tempered by life's realities.
And sometimes seeing those same sparks in our younger selves can be both endearing and a little unsettling for a parent.
Absolutely. It's a poignant reminder that those relationships are never static, right?
Right.
They're constantly evolving,
Yeah.
shaped by both internal and external forces, and that evolution takes a poignant turn when Zauner learns about her mother's illness.
Yeah, that's where the memoir really shifts gears for me emotionally. It's like suddenly all of those past conflicts, those teenage arguments, they seem to fade in the face of this new reality.
Yeah.
There's this urgency in Zauner's desire to connect with her mom, to make amends for, lost time, and
And food, unsurprisingly, becomes central to that process.
as always,
She talks about making this almost desperate vow to learn all of her mother's favorite Korean dishes, even though she admits she's not a natural in the kitchen.
it's like she's trying to master this culinary language as a way to hold on to her mother, to nourish her both physically and emotionally.
Yes.
And I don't know about you, but that really resonated with me. There's something so powerful about the act of cooking for someone you love, especially when words feel inadequate.
It speaks to that deep primal connection between food and love food and caretaking, but it's not without its complexities. Remember when Zauner's mom suggests her friend Kai teach her some of those recipes?
Oh, yeah, like this wave of insecurity washes over her.
Yeah.
She feels inadequate, almost as if she isn't Korean enough
Hmm.
to fulfill this filial duty. It made me wonder about those cultural expectations we place on ourselves,
Oh, yeah.
those unspoken standards we feel pressured to live up to.
Especially within families, right? There's this sense that we need to embody our cultural heritage perfectly,
Right.
even when we're still trying to figure out what that means for us as individuals.
And Zauner's grappling with those expectations while also navigating this new terrifying reality of her mother's illness. And there's this scene at the Eugene airport that really got to me. Zauner's expecting her mom to be there, but instead it's her dad who greets her.
It's such a small detail, but so loaded with meaning.
I know.
It's like that moment crystallizes the shift in their family dynamic. Her mother, who was always this constant anchoring presence, is no longer able to fill that role.
And it forces Zauner to reevaluate her relationship with her dad, which, as she describes, has always been more distant, less emotionally intertwined than her bond with her mother.
It highlights those often unspoken complexities within families, right?
Yes.
How our relationships with each sibling, each parent exists on its own unique plane.
Totally. And because Zauner is so honest in her writing, she doesn't shy away from her father's flaws, his past struggles with addiction, his infidelity. It would have been easy to paint him as this heroic figure
Right.
in the face of his wife's illness,
Right.
but she chooses honesty instead.
Which makes his character all the more human and relatable, right? He's flawed, he's made mistakes, but he's there, he's trying to show up for his family as
Yeah.
best he can in this incredibly difficult situation.
And it makes you think about how our parents are full, complex people with their own histories and struggles. We tend to put them in these boxes, mom or dad, but they have lives and experiences that extend far beyond those roles.
Absolutely. And it's often in times of crisis when those familiar roles are disrupted that we have the opportunity to see our parents and ourselves in a new light.
It reminds me of that moment when Zauner finally reunites with her mother at home. There's this incredibly tender description of her embracing her mom, feeling the port on her chest. It's a stark reminder of her mother's frailty,
Yes.
yet her mom tries to maintain a sense of normalcy.
Like when she suggests making her fresh tomato juice. Such a simple act, but so revealing.
Right.
It speaks to her resilience, her desire to hold on to those everyday rituals that bring comfort and a sense of control.
Have you ever made something so simple, and yet it felt loaded with meaning? That's how Zauner describes making tomato juice for her mom.
Yeah.
It's like each sip held a lifetime of unspoken emotions.
It's a beautiful example of how food transcends its physical properties and becomes this conduit for love, care, and connection, especially in the face of illness.
And those acts of care extend beyond immediate family, too. Zauner's grandmother, Halmoni, plays such a significant role in the memoir.
Oh, she's fantastic. This larger-than-life character who embodies both tradition and rebellion.
Right.
The way she effortlessly switches between sternness and affection is both endearing and intimidating.
And those anecdotes about her grandmother's love of Godori, the Korean card game, I could practically hear the cards slapping down those shouts of "Peek" and "Jota" as I was reading. It paints such a vibrant picture of their family life.
It's a reminder that even within grief, within these difficult moments, life and laughter find a way through.
Yeah.
Those shared rituals, those moments of joy, they become even more precious, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And for Zauner, they highlight the importance of those family traditions.
Yes.
Even as she navigates her own complex relationship with her Korean heritage, like when she talks about being intimidated by her Halmoni's donjim.
The infamous poop needle anecdote. It's
Right.
hilarious and a little cringeworthy, but it perfectly encapsulates that blend of cultural difference and familial love that Zauner captures so well.
It's a great example of how those seemingly insignificant moments, a childhood, fear, a shared laugh over a card game, they become these defining memories, these threads that connect us to our families and our heritage. And those memories become even more precious after her grandmother's passing, don't they? It's a loss that impacts both Zauner and her mother really deeply and sort of draws them closer together even as they grieve in their own ways.
It's a reminder that shared grief, while incredibly painful, can also be this powerful source of connection.
Yes.
They understand each other's pain on this really visceral level, having both loved and lost this formidable woman who shaped so much of their family's identity.
And it made me think about how we often learn about grief through observing how those around us process loss. And Zauner talks about witnessing her mother's grief as a teenager when her uncle passed, and how she couldn't fully grasp the depth of her mother's sadness until she experienced her own, significant losses later in life.
It speaks to how grief is a journey,
It is.
one that unfolds over time. We may intellectually understand that someone's hurting,
Right.
but it's not until we experience that same profound sense of loss ourselves that we truly connect with the rawness of their emotions.
And as Zauner's, trying to support her mother through her illness, you can feel her own anticipatory grief kind of emerging too.
Yes.
It's like this underlying current of sadness that colors every interaction,
Right.
every shared meal, every moment of joy.
That's the heartbreaking duality of caring for someone with a terminal illness, isn't it?
It is.
You're simultaneously cherishing their presence while also grieving their inevitable absence. It's a lot to carry.
It is. And food, once again, becomes this source of comfort and connection for Zauner. And it's not just about sustenance at this point. It's about recreating those familiar flavors,
Yes.
those tastes that transport her back to her childhood,
Yes.
to her mother's kitchen, to a time before illness, casts its shadow over their lives.
It's like she's trying to capture the essence of her mother in each dish, to hold on to those sensory memories as tightly as she can.
Yes.
Remember when she describes those late-night refrigerator raids with her mother?
Oh, yeah.
During their trips to Korea?
Those stolen bites of kimchi?
Yeah.
The slurping of noodles in the quiet of the night. They become these poignant reminders of their shared love for Korean food.
And after her mother's diagnosis, those culinary memories take on even greater significance.
Oh, absolutely.
There's this urgency in her desire to learn those recipes, to perfect those dishes,
Yes.
as if she's trying to outrun time itself.
It's like she's creating this tangible link to her mother through those flavors, those
Yes.
aromas that fill her kitchen. And it's not just about, replicating the dishes perfectly, is it?
Oh.
It's about the intention, the love and care that go into each step, each ingredient.
It's about continuing those traditions, honoring her mother's legacy by keeping those flavors alive.
Yes.
It's about finding a way to feel connected to her mother, even when words fail, even when physical presence is no longer possible. And I think that's where Crying in H Mart transcends being just a memoir about grief and food. It becomes this broader exploration of how we use those sensory experiences,
Wow.
the tastes, the aromas, the rituals to
Yeah.
connect with our heritage, to keep the memory of loved ones alive, to find solace and meaning in the face of loss.
It reminds us that food is so much more than sustenance.
Absolutely.
It's a language of love, a
Mhm.
bridge across cultures, a lifeline to our past, and a source of comfort in our present.
It really is. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Crying in H Mart, I want you to think about those dishes that hold the most meaning for you. The recipes that connect you to loved ones, to memories, and a sense of belonging. What culinary traditions would you want to pass down? And what stories do those flavors tell about your own journey?
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you as always.
Thank you for having me.